All right. So to just kind of jump in, you kind of talked about editing already. Let's talk about editing. Like, how did you get into film editing and video editing? And you said you went to school for it as well.
Yeah. So back in the 90s, back in high school, me and some friends, so one of my good friends, Tim, his dad worked for the Calgary Herald as a photographer back in the day. So he had, nice film cameras, but also he had like a video camera around and a decent computer and a early version of Premiere and a CD burner.
Oh, nice.
And
old school.
All this stuff. And so we decided to do a bunch of our school projects as like video projects. And I had been getting really into like we had gotten a DVD player, and the first few waves of DVDs that came out were actually like really, really high quality because they were trying to pitch the tech, right? Like they wanted consumers to like sort of get it and like understand it's like you should buy this whole new thing and replace your VCR with this and your whole library with this, and you got to have a value for that. So they had a ton of extras like director's commentaries and stuff like that. And this first sort of like, and I'm talking like early adoption, like the year that we bought a DVD player, there were 15 titles available. So getting things like Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, and these had like Ridley Scott's commentary tracks, and they got him in to do like, apparently, if you watch them all, it's very clear that he recorded all of these sort of like sequentially, like they sat him down for like
just all
3 days.
One take.
Because more or less, like he just watched like movie after movie after movie back to back and like rambled the whole time because he's constantly referencing like things he said in the other commentaries. But Ridley Scott, like he's a director who really knows his way around film and like, the craft of it beginning to end, or at least he used to. He's kind of forgotten lately, but those commentaries really gave me a thirst for like the art of filmmaking, the craft of filmmaking. And so I started like basically dabbling in it as soon as I could. And then went to SAIT for the film and video production program. And my focus there was primarily like I did the craft and technical stream, which isn't a thing anymore, but was at the time because it was like, okay, of the 3 streams, it was like there was post-production, there was writer, director, producer, and then there was craft and technical. And I was just looking at these, I'm like, I can write at home. I know how to write. I don't really need like specialized writing. I have a computer. I can probably teach myself how to edit more in depth. I'm never going to just of my own volition get hands-on time with an SR3 with like a 35 millimeter film camera with 10K HMI lights.
You don't just stumble across those.
You don't just stumble across a 3-phase power supply. So I was like, okay. So I focused on that, but then it turns out that when you get out into the industry, particularly like a lot of the work around Calgary has always been in just corporate video. And when you get out into corporate video, all the hours are in editing. You go in, we did one job where I logged maybe 20 hours as the DP, shooting all of these like instructional videos, and then logged 400 as the editor on the project. So just after like 4, 5, 6 years of that, you suddenly turn around and look at your life and you're like, oh, by volume, I am an editor. Like that, my job is as an editor. And I had of course, like I love every aspect of the process. And so like, this was not some like, oh God, what has happened to me? It was just like, I just kind of like really embraced it, cause I'd always liked it. And so, I became an editor through a combination of passion and happenstance.
And then that became kind of a pretty huge part of your early YouTube channel too. Because the video that still sticks out to me is like one of your bigger videos from, you know, sort of the earlier period of your channel is the Suicide Squad editing video. I think that was probably one of your more successful ones.
It was my the Suicide Squad video. The Art of Editing in Suicide Squad was my first breakout video. I had been building kind of a cult audience for years at that point through sort of my relationship with that guy with the glasses and I guess my innovations in video essay production. You know, for a long time I was kind of like your favorite YouTuber's favorite YouTuber.
Yeah.
I was the Velvet Underground of YouTube for years. But yeah, so the Suicide Squad video was a combination of like, you know, a combination of sort of my skills and just good timing, good subject, good timing, wide appeal. And I put that out New Year's Eve, which, you know, at the time, conventional wisdom on YouTube was like, oh no, you avoid holidays.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at it, I'm like, it's like, no, why would you avoid holidays? Like, as I was looking at my own holidays, I'm like, okay, I wake up, you know, like Christmas Day. I wake up, you got all the family stuff, presents, breakfast, and then you got like 4 hours to kill until dinner if you're not like the host. You know, tons of people on holidays have a lot of dead time where a 20 to 40 minute video that's not heavy, you know, it's just kind of like fun, that's got like good momentum. It's like they got time for that. So I put that out on New Year's Eve and it was a huge hit because then, you know, that weekend you've got all of the pop culture websites that there's nothing happening. And so they were just like, hey, here's this video that's kind of getting a bunch of traction. Go watch that. You know, it gave them an easy thing to post, and it just kind of spread like there. And so I jumped from, I think, 9,000 subs to 105K.
Oh wow!
In the course of a few weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a huge breakout. That completely changed the trajectory of the channel. That was the thing that really sort of tipped it over the point where instead of it being sort of this creative hobby that I used to keep my to keep my skills sharp, to keep me from going crazy just editing oil and gas videos all day. It went from that to like, oh, okay, I could, like, this is viable as a job. It's no longer insane. If somebody calls me up and it's like, hey, Dan, we want you to drive up to Edmonton to record a deposition video and then drive back home because you need to upload it that night and we'll pay you $200. It was suddenly like, it's like, okay, I can say no to some of those extremely crappy jobs now. Like, you know, I'm making enough, just enough on YouTube that it's like, it's a real, it's not insane for me to say like, no, I'm working on a video. I want to get it done.
Yeah, you don't have to jump on every single opportunity that comes your way.
Yeah.
So then in the progress of your YouTube channel, so where do you think you would start to describe yourself as a documentarian rather than a YouTuber?
I started self-applying that really after 2020, in part coming at it from two angles. One is that I felt like with In Search of a Flat Earth, my approach to my material was sufficiently matured that I didn't feel presumptuous by kind of accepting the title, because it had always been in the back of my mind that the sort of meta genre I've always been working in has been documentary, purely because I'm dealing with like fact-based stuff, right? If you if you make an edutainment video, it is a subgenre of documentary. You just wouldn't necessarily be like, you wouldn't necessarily categorize like Reading Rainbow as documentary, but it is.
Yeah.
And so it was with In Search of a Flat Earth that I was like, you know what, maybe it's not insane of me to self-apply that. And also, so there was a maturation on my part, and there was also a maturation of the platform. More and more people were taking it seriously, and more people were, you were getting more and more people like me who had gone through like traditional training pipelines, who have, industry experience. I've worked on multi-million-dollar productions, and, like our industry people, and are just utilizing YouTube as a platform, but also the shift was that prior to sort of about 2020, you would either get people who were like wholly in on the vernacular of YouTube, or they were just using it as a place to like host their videos. So Rachel Bloom, who I love, got mainstream success. She landed Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in part off of her YouTube content, but she was never really a YouTuber. She was, a stand-up comedian and like skit writer and actress and multi-talented performer who posted her music videos to YouTube, but wasn't really a YouTuber.
Yeah, there's a difference there.
Yeah, and so so you'd had that kind of through the teens, but it wasn't until like 2020 that I think you really saw this pivot to more people being like, I'm not just going to, I'm going to hybridize. I'm going to acknowledge the fact that, YouTube is not just the place that my content goes to get hosted. My content is part of the vernacular of YouTube, but is also borrowing very heavily from the skills of conventional stuff. So, In Search of a Flat Earth is, I think, a really great example of this, in that I'm borrowing a lot of wherever possible, I am leaning on the conventions of theatrical documentary, but the piece as a whole would never air in a theater unless I showed it. No one would pick it up for distribution, and it would not make sense as a thing that you went and bought a ticket for and sat in a theater and watched. It doesn't have that texture. It's not a movie.
Yeah.
It is a YouTube video, but it's so that was, I think, where you got this maturation on the platform. Not just me, like other people, ContraPoints. I mean, a lot of my peers who I'm friends with were doing this as well, because we were all feeding off of each other creatively. And yeah, so it was with that. I was like, people are no longer gonna laugh at me if I self-apply this. And part of it was that it's like other people were calling me that, and I was like, okay, maybe I don't need to like flinch away from that. Maybe I don't need to say, oh, I'm not, that's fake. Like, there used to be this thing that we had to deal with back in like 2009, 2010, 2011, where viewers would well-meaningly add literally everything somebody had done to IMDb.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd go on you'd look up like Lindsay Ellis on IMDb, and it would have just like 50 episodes of The Nostalgia Critic.
Yeah, just like
and it's like, because she was in every single thing. And we had to tell people to stop, because it was like, for most of the talent, it didn't really matter, but there were a handful of people like Lindsay, like Ed, who were doing industry work in parallel with it. And it was like, no, my IMDb profile is a professional tool that is part of like my resume that I use to get jobs. And if you've flooded it with like 3-second cameos on Doug's YouTube videos, people aren't going to take me seriously. They think they're going to look at that and they're going to be like, oh, you're padding your resume with made up crap.
Yeah.
And so that sort of interaction with others would make me reticent to just sort of like embrace titles like documentarian, because it's like you're sort of overstepping it. And it's like, I don't know, about 2020 was when I felt comfortable with that, and felt like everything had sort of caught up with that. Yeah. And then, of course, like just this last year, the American Society of Editors, ACE, or American Cinema Editors, ACE, yeah. They opened up a bunch of categories for, it's called native digital. So like if you post something directly to YouTube, it gets, it sort of falls into the category of native digital. They opened that up, that it's like you can, if your project otherwise meets the criteria in terms of length, subject matter, you can submit it for awards considerations and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like an external recognition of...
Yeah, and we're getting a lot more of that, of like the industries and the industry organizations acknowledging that like there are a lot of people like me with training who are taking it seriously as an art form, as a craft, as a business, and are applying skills and talents and trying to move the art form forward, and embracing kind of everything that works, and that's real, and it is a part of the art, and it deserves recognition. So
I want to dig a bit more into the Flat Earth video. You're wearing the Minnewanka sweater. At what point in that project were you like, I'm going to go do this experiment, definitively prove that the Earth is round, and how did that kind of mesh with the rest of the project then?
The experiment actually led the video by years. I had wanted to do that experiment since, I think the first time I thought it up was 2015, 2016.
Oh, wow.
Because I've had an interest in Flat Earth as an expression of online culture for a really long time. And I had just, I don't even remember when it had initially crossed my mind of like, oh, you could just use a really big lake. I guess I would be watching a bunch of stuff where they were using like the ocean, or people were, one of the big examples that comes up a lot is Lake Michigan, so like looking across Lake Michigan to Chicago. Because on a clear day you can see
the buildings.
You can see just like the tips of the building. And flat earthers will pull out really bad photos of Chicago from Michigan and use that. And I was like, it's like, okay, I don't live on the coast. I don't live on the Great Lakes. Yeah, but we got to have some like long lakes. We got to have some big lakes in Canada. We got to have some stuff. And so I just, by pure coincidence, I came across this one video that I featured in Search of a Flat Earth, of like, we're out here at Lake Minnewanka, proving that the Earth is flat. And I was like, I live right near there. So I had dreamed up the idea years and years beforehand, but then just didn't really have the hook. And then Philosophy Tube and H Bomber Guy, both kind of around the time that I was working on that, they put out Flat Earth videos that I initially felt like, okay, like they've kind of covered everything that I want to cover. And so it took a couple more years, and it wasn't until like the rise of QAnon that I really sort of crystallized my own thoughts on it, and dove into and made In Search of a Flat Earth.
So that, like, Flat Earth it's not going anywhere. It's been around for a long time, but so that idea can take time to develop. What about something like NFTs, or even like the GameStop stuff? Where did the impetus come to actually make a full length kind of feature on those issues?
Oh, that's challenging. My process for coming up with the subjects for the longer term videos, or my process for coming up with the subjects for the longer videos really just kind of comes down to obsession. I will get fixated on a subject and I can't let it go. I can't avoid it. I find myself with kind of pages and pages of fragmentary stuff just sort of written about it, regardless of what else I'm trying to work on at the time. And then the pivot into a full video usually comes from hitting on a line, a title, a visual, a gimmick that crystallizes the project. And suddenly, instead of it just being a bunch of, forum posts in my mind, it becomes like, oh, I can see what this is going to look like.
One guiding idea. Okay.
Yeah. So this is financial advice, really sort of, a lot of times the thing that ends up crystallizing it is a title sequence. Like I'll come up with just an idea for like, oh man, what would be a really good, would be a really sick, like drop moment is like, oh, like what if you did this? And it's like, what if we went to Vegas and you had like the Vegas sign and like this whole celebration thing, and then like everything went bust. And, like, what if that was kind of a storyline? Yeah, that's the kind of, that'll be the thing that I'll hit on, that'll make it all come together. So line goes up. It was when I had the idea of doing a bit to camera, standing in front of the graffiti NFTs, because to me those represented the falseness of it.
Yeah.
That they were trying to present this air of like, oh, we've created something that's actually punk, that people are like going out and just like tagging onto the side of buildings, but they weren't. They were all basically sponsored spots.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, we got full permission from this guy to paint this on his gate. In fact, we paid him to let us paint it on the shutter of his garage. And it's like, okay, this is all performance. And so that visual is what really crystallized the project for me.
Well, with NFTs too, like the whole thing is it's non-fungible, it's exclusive, and then it's like, well, someone can go paint it on a wall. Like it kind of, it's a criticism in and of itself.
Yeah, the absurdity. Yeah, the absurdity top to bottom, from every angle and every direction.
Looking at like this is financial advice. I still like, even I watched it the other day just to prepare for this, and I just cannot wrap my head around how crazy it must have been to research these Reddit communities and parse through all their bullshit, and their language, and what was that process like?
I've always found language fascinating. That probably comes through a lot in my videos, is that I talk a lot about language. I talk a lot about words and the way that people use words. So that's probably not surprising. But I find language fascinating. I find it easy to grasp onto. And I have a lot of experience with high control groups, and groups and organizations that really manipulate language. I grew up not impoverished, but like pretty poor, and we were in sort of this perfect demographic for being the target of like MLMs and stuff like that. So like my family, we got snookered into a couple MLMs over the years for complete nonsense, magnet bracelets, food supplements, stuff like that. Because it was like, and all of the language about like, using, all of the way that they use language to combine sort of money and morality and
Also like a bit of a doomsday.
Yeah, like this really
thing.
multifaceted thing with it's like doomsday and really like an appeal to your like attempts at maintaining your pride and dignity. The way that these things are always framed as like, oh, here's how you can reclaim your place in the world, and take control of your destiny. So I had a lot of experience with that through my life, and that made it really easy to sort of see through the facade and like kind of like clock like what Super Stonk is doing, and what they're kind of doing like almost just like instinctively to each other with no guiding hand. And in particular for GameStop, for the whole GameStop thing, that was the really compelling thing about it, was that it was a completely self-organizing cult.
Yeah.
There are thought leaders, but the closest thing that it has to a real like in the leader role is Ryan Cohen, the CEO of GameStop, who is not actually directly involved with them in any way. Like, he's not issuing orders to them. He's not telling them to do things. They are by and large decoding orders for themselves out of the things he does via just like numerology, via, Q style baking.
It's very similar to QAnon and all things like that.
And he is visibly sort of aware of that, and has, for legal purposes, appeared to take advantage of that in the past with regards to Bed Bath & Beyond. But he's not posting on their forums. He's not, he doesn't have sock puppets in there being like, oh, I think we should do this. He's not, it's just the absolute farthest distanced leadership you could imagine. And yet he might as well be Jim Jones. And that I thought was like, that was fascinating. And it was, the fact that there was the whole finance element where it was so heavily reliant on this really, really in the weeds stuff, the very technical details about how that finance industry operates, in a way that I found really compelling, because it's like, okay, I can see totally how somebody gets initially into this just off of the fact that it's so oblique. It's like, I don't understand how the stock market works. The stock market is a thing that they talk about on the news as though,
might as well be magic.
And so it's like, okay, I understand how people can get easily misled by being like, in the same way that, quantum mystics just reference a bunch of science that you don't understand. I can see how just sort of waving towards finance that you don't understand could have the same effect. But then also it was like, okay, some of the dumbest guys I know work on Wall Street. It can't be that hard to actually learn this stuff. And it turns out it's not. There is plenty of stuff that is like really complicated, but it's not unlearnable. It's not unapproachable. And it was sort of just at this like perfect level of like dense enough that I felt we could, dense enough, but also explainable enough that I felt we could build a really good narrative out of just sort of this like needle drop moment, or just this kind of like mic drop of like, it's like, oh, here's how things actually work. And this is why like everything that they're saying, they might as well be talking about, the power of the One Ring. It's made up. It doesn't exist. It's not real. They are spouting fiction.
Yeah. How did it come? Because with all that information, how do you, from a production and scripting standpoint, present such sort of obtuse and, in many cases, nonsensical information in a way that is entertaining and digestible for an audience?
You make good stuff. You write words good. That's sort of the secret sauce, is that I don't really know. I just know that I've got a talent for it. I mean, and I can say this, like, that talent I've built over years by just being frequently putting myself in a position where I need to explain complicated ideas to people who don't have the time or space to really deal with that. One of my first jobs out of school was working for Alberta Health Services, and as part of my job, one of the many things in my job was preparing patient materials. So, like, a doctor would write up a thing, and then I had to take that and convert it into like an infographic or something. For like, here's what you do with your medicine. Here's what to expect with your chemo. And so things that like mattered, I have to take them like really seriously and put myself in the mindset of like, okay, who's going to be reading this, and like, what is going to stand out to them? What is going to just sort of like go over their heads? What needs to be repeated multiple times? What maybe needs a metaphor? What, how do you make sure that someone is getting all the information that they need and that they understand the importance of that information? And part of that comes from the fact that, like, I've got some, I don't really want to say like learning disabilities, but I've had struggles with like not grasping things, which as a person, as a gifted kid, as someone who grew up under sort of the gifted kid moniker a lot of the times, where I had subjects that were just like effortless, and then other ones that I struggled with. The ones that I struggled with were particularly frustrating, and I just found myself kind of like obsessed with like, why don't I understand it? Or where's the break point here? Where's the disconnect? Why am I not getting this? Is it being explained poorly? Did I get, and some of this derives from like when I finally like, I was terrible at math growing up. Really bad at it. It was my worst subject, and I was one of those people who wholesale embraced like, I am not a math person. I just don't get math. I treat it as just like this existential thing that it's like, Dan Olson is not a math person existentially. That is simply a tautology of the universe. But I wanted to leave the doorway open for going into like engineering in university, maybe, and to do that, you need Math 31, pre-calculus. But Dan, you're bad at math. You can't get into pre-calculus unless you're at least decent enough at math. Like, if you've got a 60 in Math 30, they will not let you in.
You're not doing calculus.
You're not taking the class. So I really wanted to take the class. So I finally like knuckled down and focused and dove in Math 30, and some things just finally clicked. There was a bunch of stuff that never clicked. I still don't like intuitively understand perms and comms. And if you ask me to do conics, I am a lost little baby bird. But there was a bunch of stuff, like particularly like linear algebra, basically finally fell into place for me. And so I took the class, and I loved calculus. It wound up being like so much fun and so interesting and so compelling, and it changed the way that I looked at the world, and it changed the way that I evaluated things. And that sort of put me in this place of like, okay, why did I struggle so much with math up until like this point in my life? And then why did I fall in love with math and become the kind of person that everybody that I start saying things and be like, oh, well, I'm not a math person. And I have to be like, I was garbage at math until 12 months ago. And in reflecting on that, I realized some things about like where those fractures had formed and how had I failed to learn stuff. Oh, and there's also this amazing book that I read, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and that famous book that didn't really intersect directly with things, but forced me to, not forced, introduced me to the concept of pedagogy. That like, oh, the subject of like how you teach things to people is that is a whole subject in and of itself. That many people have written about, have talked about. I was like, oh, okay, like this is a serious thing. Like this is not just like a black box. We know things about this, and we can approach it through certain lenses, and we can do that. And so I became really like meta aware of my own learning process. And then when I went into writing a script about about a thing, I was then always aware of like, okay, how do you take this information, make it entertaining, make it digestible? And there is no like, I don't know that I could sit here and tell you how to do that. I just know it when I see it. That I can look at a script and basically I can put myself outside of it and go like, okay, if I knew nothing about this subject, where would I get lost? If I was back in grade 11 and this was math, where would I be sitting there going like, I'm not a math person. Yeah. This is all nonsense. Where would that frustrate? Like I tap into that frustration of when I was 17 and not a math person, but then like figured out being a math person is actually just the thing that you learn. So I that's maybe, I guess, the spiritual core of it, is I tap into my own frustrations with having trouble learning things and coming across information that I don't understand. And then like, okay, how do you navigate out of that? Yeah. And it turns out that if you know both ends of it, you can find that path. And then you make it entertaining by just, the standards of like, timing, rhythm, structure, visuals. Yeah. I mean, and this is financial advice. It was not an easy process. We scrapped an earlier version of it. Yeah. About 40% of it just went in the bin.
Just didn't fit the bill.
It was just like, it just wasn't working. It was hard to follow. It didn't explain things clearly. And I published a draft version of it. And the patrons came back, and like my test viewers came back and were like, this is really good. This is really good if you already know what the subject is. And like, I was getting like on the surface very positive feedback. But if you read below the surface, it's like, okay, if your most generous viewers are sort of like adding these caveats, it means that a mainstream audience is just gonna like bounce off it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, so I got really depressed. I took like 2 weeks off, and then I went to PAX, and like I basically gave myself a month to just like think about it and like, okay, where's the problem? And like digest all of the feedback that I'd gotten. And I realized that it's like, oh, I need to go back even deeper. I need to go down to the level of like, what is a stock? And so if you watch the video, there's a moment where I literally say that out loud. Like, what is a stock? What is a share? Because I realized that like that common vocabulary was actually really core to it. And also I now had sort of this like hook framing that I was looking for, like that was missing, of like this little, it's like, okay, I now have this little anecdote about like, what is a stock? Well, we're it's 7,000 years ago, and one of us stumbled on some copper, and we're like, hey, I want to dig up this copper, but I can't do it on my own. Do you want to help me dig up this copper? Yeah, let's do it. And so we pool our resources, and we decide that anything we sell the copper for, we're going to split it 50-50. And we just say that out loud. Yeah. Okay, I'll take half, you take half. We just say out loud, I'll take half, you take half. We have invented the share.
Yeah.
And just really, really like pulling it down to like that very fundamental level of like, here's, let's build the vocabulary of what we like, of what we really need to know in order to understand why the things that these people are saying is insane. And then the entertainment emerges from like, once you can effectively paint the absurdity, the entertainment just sort of like emerges from that.
Yeah.
And but no, it was a really difficult process of identifying like, okay, what information is actually like is needed, because we at various points had just like way too much, and we were starting from like the wrong assumptions of what people were going to be familiar with. We had just gotten too deep into it and needed to back out and like overhaul it. And yeah, about 40% of it just got completely overhauled.
Well, I can imagine too, just being so deep into that for so long, doing the research, like you almost start to lose the plot yourself. I could see where you just don't even really, it'd be hard to connect with an outside viewer.
Yeah. It's the biggest challenge in any of these large projects is far and away losing track of the basics, and that you've spent so long researching it that by the time you sit down to actually write, you forget that your average viewer has barely even heard of the subject. And so you're starting on like, it's like you're starting on page 50 of the textbook instead of page 1, because you've just accidentally taken so much as common knowledge. You've taken so much for granted. You're talking about the GameStop squeeze without even explaining that there was a GameStop squeeze in 2021. And they're just like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
So talking about like, you're talking about how you're scaling up.
Actually, I got a really good example.
No, go ahead.
it would be like talking about the war on terror without actually ever mentioning 9/11. Which is a thing you could probably get away with, but in like 50 years time, you're going to have to mention as a predicate that like, okay, so some terrorists flew some planes into New York.
You're doing your audience a disservice at the same time.
Yeah, if you're taking it for granted that they are aware of it, and it's like some 9/11 probably big enough that you can just gesture towards it and be fine. The GameStop squeeze of 2021, a little more niche.
So talking about the evolution of like the YouTube sphere, like people who used to make videos on their own, you talk about H Bomber Guy, yourself, Philosophy Tube, now have teams behind them. How does that change the landscape for just smaller creators then too, and people wanting to get into YouTube?
That's a really so the bar for getting into YouTube has gone up, but simultaneous to it, the tools for getting into YouTube have gone up as well. And what I think holds even to this day is that fundamentally what you need is a good idea and good writing and presentation, particularly if we're talking video essay. The things that some of us do with teams, part of what I do with a team stems from my own fetishization of process and technique and what I imagine I am, but is ultimately like superfluous or unnecessary. I watched a really, really good mini doc the other day from a tiny channel about the history of Viewmaster. So like, you know, the...
Oh, yeah, I just saw that on your Blue Sky. I was scrolling through. That looked really interesting.
Yeah, and that's just, you know, it's very cleanly presented. It's a lot of work, you know. He's got a lot of graphics that he built for it, or used templates to build from, and he got some help from another YouTuber who went out and got like footage for him of like a local thing, and I guess advised on the script in some ways. But by and large, like that was just is one guy just sitting there putting stuff together on a computer, you know, recording into a microphone. Fundamentally, particularly since so much of documentary can just be built out of pre-existing visuals and a voiceover. You know, I mean, that's Ken Burns's career. No one looks at that weird. Like, so much of it can just be built out of those fundamentals that the real hurdle is have a good script, have a good presentation, know what you're talking about. And in many ways, like, having good visuals is the easy part. Because you can find a template for that. You can just go on Envato and like buy a template, and then you need to source your graphics, but then you just drop them in the template, you know, and it looks, you know, maybe it's not the most original because you are just working off of a template, but like it's fine. And also, you know, Sean doesn't even bother with that. He's got a stock
it's the picture of the skull.
It's the picture of the skull sitting at a computer for like 40% of the runtime. So like even people who have gotten to a point where like they could have a team behind them have opted not to have a team behind them because their creative desires don't require it in any way, shape, and form. It's just that some of us have fixations or, you know, ambitions or self-image, or just want to do it that way. You know, for me, I suspect that my friends share this. Part of it is that so there's a classic line in The Dark Knight where the Joker is like burning this giant pile of money, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, my interests are cheap. I like dynamite and gasoline." And that's a cringe scene to reference, but it's true of a lot of YouTubers. You know, you've got the Jake Pauls who want to be beloved on the world stage, or at least like infamous, if not famous, and want to have fast cars and giant houses and all of that. And there is no amount of money on the planet that is enough for them. And then there's a lot of other creators who just want to like make good stuff and find themselves stumbling into a level of success where suddenly they have more money than they know what to do with. And in the scope of things, it's not actually that much money. It's just, if you've been living as a starving artist for, you know, a decade, all of a sudden a comfortable middle class income is like, I just don't even know what to do with all of this.
Like, you can go out for dinner once in a while.
You know, like, suddenly you're like, okay, well, if my car breaks, I'm no longer stressed about that. Like, I can just deal with it, and that's great. But it's like, you know, $100,000 a year income is in the scope of our wildly unfair society not actually that much. No. It's a very healthy income, but like that's not buy the world money. Yeah. That's not buy a mansion money.
You're comfortable.
You're comfortable. And in fact, you're probably 2x comfortable. And if you've been an adult living as a starving artist for years, you're maybe 3x comfortable. Because you've already built your lifestyle around, I built my lifestyle around barely scraping $30,000 a year. And so that puts you in a position where suddenly it's like, oh, I want to do this little bit ambitious thing. Okay, I can just pay my friends to like help me with that. I can maybe bring my friends along for the ride. And so I think that is sort of the instinct where a lot of these teams end up sort of growing out of, is just that it's like, I don't want to say make work or charity or whatnot, but like I can pass it forward. I can give somebody else a job because I can afford to give them a job. And then that's somebody who is now making a living doing a creative endeavor that they want to do, rather than just like sitting on top of whatever I'm making, like smug. That's a very long way of saying that I think it puts pressure on new people. I think it self-imposes pressure on new people who maybe look at those teams and feel a sense of inadequacy, or maybe see it as an inherent hurdle that they can't get over, that it's like, oh, I could never be H Bomber Guy because H Bomber Guy has has a team. But Harry's team is him, his producer, and then a cloud of friends who just really sort of like come in as needed. And his actual core team is 2 people. It is still by and large him. Abby at Philosophy Tube, like much more professional sort of like production that she's built out there. Resembles an adult, like a proper respectable professional adult business. And she's done a very, very good job with that. And the results show, like, because they're able to put stuff out on a much more like regular timetable.
And with quite high production
values, like for all of them. But then you've got Sean, like, still just doing stuff in his basement. Noah Caldwell-Gervais shoots some things to camera, like he shoots his intros and outros, and they are as low budget, scrappy DIY as they've always been, and people love that. It's maybe cringe to talk about it as like a brand, but there is a sincere authenticity to it that people react to. That's why they, responded well to his stuff in the first place. And there's no reason to leave that behind.
There was that Tom Nicholas video a few years ago.
Holding the mic.
Yeah, about why people are holding the mic now, and about how that affects, like, how do you, as like a new creator, how does that even factor in? Like, I don't even know what I'm trying to ask here, but like,
I mean, the thing is that creators have always had to grapple with the fact that there are other people doing what they want to do, and have been doing it longer, and have been doing it better, and have been doing it with more resources. When I first started, I had to use my laptop camera because I didn't have a video camera. And it took a while before, I finally got a video camera. And it took, and I had the video camera for a hot minute before I got a light. So that's always been a factor. But for a century now, the feature film was invented basically, like, the 1920s is sort of when the first feature films start cropping up, that you go back and you watch them and you're like, okay, I can see, like, that's a modern movie. That's not just a really long, skit. That's a feature film. So for about 100 years now, we've had the feature films. So that's 100 years of people trying to figure out how to make a feature film when there's already been people ahead of them who have been doing it for longer with more resources. And people have always found a way in. You know, it's not easy, but it's never been easy.
No.
It wasn't easy for the people who came before you. It won't be easy for the people who come after you. But there will always be, you know, there will always be churn. There will always be somebody who falls out of style and just goes into decline or retires or moves on or crashes and burns. And there will always be some new hotness who just like hits with the right thing at the right time. And maybe they're lucky and it's the first thing that they do. Like they come out right out of the gate swinging. Soup Emporium is a channel, put out very few things, but like came right out with the video about Coco the gorilla that just popped off, like grand slam, first time at bat. So, you know, and then, I mean, that Viewmaster one I was talking about, dude's been grinding away at just making videos about Viewmaster for years.
All right.
You know, he's got like, oh man, what was the actual count? Like dozens of videos.
Just all about the Viewmaster.
Just all about Viewmaster, all about like the history, all about like the real locations that they're based on. It's like, you know, but that's, you know, I don't want to say grind. That is honing craft. You know, I would say that my videos don't even really come into their own until 2015. You know, like 2011 through 2014, like I don't disown those, but like there's not a lot of them that I go back and watch. Well, especially those first 2 years.
I think even just the earliest stuff you even have on your channel now is like the earliest folding ideas with the puppet.
Yeah. And you can see, and there's, you know, there's kind of this like digital archaeology to it as you go back through it. And it's like, okay, changing trends on YouTube, changing trends on the online media landscape. Obviously, Blip TV, its whole life cycle is sort of encapsulated in that stuff. You know, there was a point in time where like the channel was on Blip and Blip had a much different culture around it. And part of that came from just the structure of how the site itself was laid out and the vocabulary that it used, the design vocabulary that it used in terms of presenting things to the audience as a series. You know, that it was very much built around trying to push serial media. So, you know, seasons, episodes, you watch one, like you could string together 4 or 5 videos and then the viewer would actually like sort of autoplay through them in sequence, you know, in the same way that if you pull up Netflix and just start watching a TV show, you know, they borrowed from that for digital native content. And so that informed how I built those earliest years of the channel. And then when I moved to YouTube, because Blip capsized, when I moved back, I was very conscious of the fact that the dialect of the user interface was going to be different and people were going to engage with the content different. They were going to drop in much more chaotically based off of like the sidebar. They were going to respond less well to part 1, 2, 3, you know, that was particularly at that point in time in 2015 was seen very much as like an artifact of like early YouTube with its upload limits, where it's like things needed to be cut apart into all of these different sections purely to get around like the 10-minute play limit. So I made a very conscious pivot. Oh, and also the puppet gimmick. I mean, I set aside the puppet gimmick in part because it would play less well on YouTube, and also because I had an injury to my shoulder that made it very difficult to operate the puppet. And there are performance considerations in that. The number of times I needed to redo shots because as I had been performing, I had just been like unconsciously drifting into frame.
Oh, really?
You know, and when you're doing it all on your own, like, you know, that
starts to feel ridiculous.
well, it's hard to like track that because you're trying to like perform a script.
Yeah.
And you're also trying to frame yourself, but you're actually trying to frame your hand that's being held up above your head. And so maybe you're a fool because you realize that this is a stress position that you can't maintain for 40 minutes straight. Yeah. So you settle for the less stressful this. But that means that the puppet is now like at the level where like if you just kind of drift over like this, you're now in frame. It turns out there's a reason why Jim Henson did it like this. And there's also a reason why Frank Oz, like, I don't know, why his back will never work right.
I wanted to ask as well, like how, because you're talking about how the platform itself shapes the content. How important is it to even have like a social media strategy beyond just YouTube? Is that something a consideration for you, like using your Blue Sky, or I don't know if you really use X anymore, but or like TikTok as well to promote and push your stuff?
I very consciously had and maintained my Twitter account for a really long time as part of a strategy. And one of the things that I was kind of insistent on back in the like that guy with the glasses forums days was finding a balance, finding a personal internal balance between thinking about your channel through sort of the cold calculating lens of a Hollywood producer who thinks in terms of brand and leverage and synergy and IP exploitation, and thinking about it through the lens of an artist who just wants to make things and just wants to manifest into the world stuff that they would like to see. That you can balance those and you can learn things from both points of view, and you can pick and choose sort of what you want and discard bits. And so I was very aware from early on that having some kind of external presence would be a benefit, to promoting my work and promoting me as an online personality. And it would also be a place that I could, so I would use my Twitter account to test drive ideas. It's like, okay, tweet about a subject that's on my mind that I already want to talk about. And okay, is this a 5-page idea or is this a 3-tweet idea?
Yeah.
And that sounds, you can frame that as like cold and calculating, or you could frame that as like, well, stand-up comedians test drive material all the time. Like they go do small club shows because they've got some new jokes, they've got some new stuff that they've written. They're still working on. Yeah. They're not quite sure where the pauses need to be.
Yeah.
They're not quite sure, like they've got a punchline, but like how quickly do you get to the punchline?
Yeah, where do you put the emphasis?
Yeah, like, refine it. And, so like refining your material is a tried and true, tested, respected, important part of the creative process. And so finding that harmony there of like, okay, having this social media presence is good for the channel for these reasons, these cold calculating producer reasons, but also it's a place where I can behave a certain way with a different pressure expectation. I can test out material. I can, practice wording. I can think through things. I can see how people respond to something. I can spitball an idea and then someone comes back and is like, that's stupid. It doesn't work like that at all. Link to Wikipedia article that makes you go like, oh, okay, like this idea is dead from the get-go. And I'm glad that I learned that now in a tweet instead of after spending 4 months making a video on it. But the calculus of social media is constantly in flux. I have, to a degree, been freed of the shackles of it. I still post my major videos to Twitter, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I have not shuttered the account like many other people have, but I've taken my banting and material test drive to Blue Sky, which has a very different sort of like culture and texture to it. But no, by and large, I have ascended past the crass need for that, and I don't envy anyone who is maybe like trying to get started in 2026 and kind of does need to actively maintain a multi-platform presence. And I've seen a lot of people like doing it very, very well. So like Mini Minuteman,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of his
actual
stuff.
name, Milo Rossi.
Yes.
So like Milo Rossi, Mini Minuteman, he does a very, very good job. Like he started in shorts and then his long form stuff evolved out of his short content on TikTok. And so he's really good at it. Stanzi Potentia, she's also like really good at it. But again, like her long form stuff evolved out of her shorts. I'm seeing a lot less success sort of going the other way. Not none. There's plenty of people who are doing like long form and also like really understand short form. Big Joel, he's really good at it. And I've just kind of looked at, I dabble every now and then. I'll have an idea where I'm like, yeah, this is a TikTok. And that's usually about once every 2-3 months. And maybe that'll change now that I've hired an editor, and I can approach fewer projects with the dread of like, oh, I need to do everything. That was actually the thing that tipped. Okay, so the thing that tipped me over, the thing that tipped me over the edge about hiring an editor, despite the fact that I pride myself on being an editor, is that back in the summer, I was at an event with Hank Green. And Hank was like, oh yeah, I just hired an editor and it's one of the greatest things I've ever done. And I gave him my usual spiel about like, well, I'm an editor. That's my art. That's my craft. Like I take great pride in my edits. And he was like, well, the thing you should consider is that like, is there ever a project that you didn't do because you came up with the idea and then went, yeah, but then I need to make it. Is there ever a project that like you didn't do because you would need to be the one editing it?
Yeah.
I was like, screw you, Hank. Screw you, Hank, for being right. But then like, so that was sort of the thing that tipped me over the edge, was finally 6 months after that conversation, really reflecting on it and realizing that like, yeah, actually there are a lot of projects over the years, a lot of like small things, just, really like a lot of tiny videos that I had an idea for but was like, yeah, but then I'd need to edit it.
Yeah.
And so being able to like sort of separate that a little bit was the was finally the there was a word thing that pushes you over was sort of the tipping point there.
Broke the camel's back.
Yeah. Metaphors.
Yeah. Before we kind of start wrapping up here, with AVOLA, we're really concerned about the landscape for young creatives, especially here in Calgary. I was just wondering if there's some sort of big point, some big word of advice you could give for local young creatives who are, doing their stuff, grinding, but also, might be struggling with the chaos of the world.
Embrace the chaos, find energy in it in whatever way you can, whether that is finding the joy and wonder that exists in the world and continues to exist regardless of the aspirations of evil people, or whether that is in anger. Find energy in the chaos wherever you can. And fundamentals, writing, have a good idea, performance, practice performance, and a very, very classic, basic theater stuff, vocal warm-ups, talk to yourself in a mirror, record stuff with no intent of posting it, and then force yourself to actually listen to it and edit it, and make things that are almost purely for practice. A not awful idea, don't post these, but remake someone else's video. If you post it, it's plagiarism.
Yeah.
If you don't post it, it's practice. Yeah. But remake somebody else's thing to figure out how it works. And it doesn't, maybe it's a video essay that you love. Maybe it's, Shakespeare. Maybe you sit there and figure out, how to visualize Mercutio's big monologue in Romeo and Juliet, a plague on both your houses. Perform stuff. And, and maybe performing other people's stuff will help you develop it. But at some point, you're probably going to need to learn to tolerate the sound of your own voice.
Yeah.
There's a few things in this that are just sort of that just go with the territory. And if you're going it alone or going it just as one or two people, it's very hard to get around. Learn to write, learn to talk, learn to edit, and break down. Yeah, I would highly, highly recommend breaking down other people's stuff, whether that's movies, whether that's other people's vlogs, whether that's podcasts, just anything that you like, anything that resonates with you. Really approach it critically and do all of all those cringe things that you were told in English class about theme and structure. Internalize it and figure out why things motivate you the way that they do. Look at yourself. Look at why you like the things that you like, and get passionate about it. Figure out how you tick. Figure out how you learn things, figure out how things make you feel a certain way, and that enables you to then, ideally, that enables you to then do that with intent. When I said that a lot of times the tipping moment for me in making a project is coming up with a really good title sequence. Part of that comes from the fact that I know that a really, really strong title drop gets me fired up. It gets me invested. It pitches me on why I should care about a thing without needing to actually say, here's why you should care about a thing. Yeah. It gives me a snapshot into the underlying energy. It gives me a snapshot into the whole. And so, In Search of a Flat Earth, this image of the lake and, the splendor of Banff contrasted against the insanity of reality denial. Just sort of crammed into this 30-second title sequence was the thing that energized it. And if I didn't know that that's what I respond to, I don't know that I would ever have arrived at that. And it was the same, and that's a thing that I use in a lot of videos. It's okay, cold open, mic drop, into a title sequence with, you know, a musical tone and a montage and word art.
Yeah.
Because it works, and I know it works because it works on me. And so if you know what works on you, you can critically break it down and figure out how to rebuild it.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been a blast. And yeah, thanks.
All right.